Pop songs don't last long. They take a couple of minutes to play, and after a couple of years, people mostly don't listen to them except as souvenirs of the heady days or the moonlit nights of 1964 or 1982. The fact that they're so short-winded doesn't explain why so many of them are historically short-sighted. That's because they're written mostly for teenagers who naturally aren't interested in anybody much older than themselves. Talking Heads, though, have always been older than their years.
Mommy had a little baby, there he is, fast asleep. He's just a little plaything, why not wake him up?
They've been going for just over a decade, and since 1977, they've brought out a parade of snazziness and humour on albums, films and videos. David Byrne may like to make himself look clueless or strung out, a little boy lost in a world of consumer flash and political dilemma. He often says, "I don't know," when you ask him a question, and so do the songs. But that's not because he's ignorant or unconcerned, but because he's still thinking things out, skeptically, politically, musically. On the new album, Naked, this musical thinking involved writing the instrumental parts first and then finding the words and melodies for them. It also required a journey to Paris.
Paris at the moment is kind of having this kind of musical ferment of all these different musicians from different cultures are all kind of mixing and are aware of what one another are doing, and there's maybe something happening there. And so we thought we would go and work with some of those musicians and work surrounded by that atmosphere. That's it. That's how it was done.
That's the way it is.
It's where they just find the only musician who's gonna make their music like me, someone like me, because I grew up in Europe, and that makes some mix some kind of rock African music. David said that, you know, that David is very close. Is someone very close, and he said to me that, look, if you know I'm gonna play something, you have to come with your African spirit inside, and play what you want to play. Play what you wanna. I never heard anything I played because I was too much busy, and I've done. They didn't tell me when the album gonna be mixed and everything like that.
Doing it backwards, doing the music first and then the words and the top line melody later, you can get kind of stuck into a bind. So we end up cutting extra musical tracks so that if some of them never get words or whatever, then there's enough for a record.
I remember this one. Nice. Woo!
All right.
Music is supposed to be an international language. Walk into any shanty town, sing a B-flat, and people will flock around you, understanding what you mean. That's the story, anyway. An old story. Nowadays, there's a new version of that old story. It's called world music. The idea is you take a bunch of musicians from a variety of cultures. They get together and influence each other a lot. A bit of gamelan, shade of Afro rhythm, maybe some white soul. Now, of course, this could be dreadful. A sort of musical safari holiday with the music no better than the flamenco that's dished out to tourists on the Costa del Sol. What makes the difference is when the songs really ask questions about the world, inquire about the many worlds we live in. And if they do that, then they can have a sense of harmony, which is more than just singing in thirds, and a sense of time, which is better than just counting 1, 2, 3, 4 in a bar. One of the jolliest songs on the new album is Nothing But Flowers. It's about the paradise of the Green Party. Factories disappear, streams run with Perrier water, the trees return, white sugar becomes extinct, and the shopping malls are covered with flowers. The song is creatively in two minds, two worlds. The words regret the passing of one way of life, but the music sounds released, airy, spacious. So Nothing But Flowers brims over with questions about civilized man and his longing for a simple life.
Dinosaurs, cars run on gasoline. Where have they gone now? It's nothing but flowers. There was a factory, now there are mountains and rivers. You got it, we caught a rattlesnake, now we got something for dinner. You got it. There was a shopping mall, now it's all covered with flowers. You got it, if this is paradise, I wish I had a lawnmower. You got it.
Once I had the kind of general concept of what the song would be, and I had the melodies, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, little melodies and all the, for each bit. Then it was just a question of writing down all my thoughts of based on that scenario of the world gone to seed and all the shopping malls, you know, pavements broken up by flowers and weeds and things. And once you imagine that scenario, you just kind of go on and talk and write down everything you can have. So you have pages of one-liners or two-liners.
Now it's only fields and trees. Where is the time now? It's nothing but flowers.
If you can fit words to music that's in some sense already there, what's it like then fitting music to images that are already there, like the Last Emperor stuff that you've just done?
I guess in a funny way, it's the same process. You have this set of restrictions that you have to do, that you have to fit the time of the scene and the mood of that and that kind of thing, but then you're completely open as to how you achieve that. The music for The Last Emperor was done for the scenes where the emperor is a child, and so I had to write music that was kind of sometimes childlike, that kind of expressed the point of view sometimes of this bratty kid. For some Chinese musicians here in London, and in most cases their reaction was that, how did I do it? It sounded very authentic. So I was kind of shocked.
How do you do it, do you think? Because you do it with a lot of other styles, it seems to me.
I don't know.
Lots of stimuli go into David Byrne's music. He stays hungry, wide-eyed, on the ready. Some people might think that he's on the make, too, a lyrical magpie ready to pick up anything which might make him glitter. But there's a canniness and integrity about the way in which he relates to, say, African music and the radio messages of revivalists. He put The Continent of Slaves and The Land of the Free together on an album, My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, he made in 1981. How did you think out the tracks on My Life in the Bush of Ghosts? Did you start from the pre-recorded voices and write the music to fit them, or did you set the music and then try and find a voice for it?
Yeah, we'd have the tracks maybe 3/4 finished. And then we'd cut in the broadcast or a tape of a Lebanese singer or whatever, and just try at different times at random almost. You'd let them say a phrase, start the phrase on a beat, and then just let the music go, and then when the next musical thing happens, start another phrase. It seems like an enormous amount of tape editing and all that kind of thing, but it wasn't. It was actually done pretty quickly.
This kind of editing has become fashionable now, and it's called sampling. But David Byrne was sampling something more intransigent than disco hits, the roots of his own and other cultures, the words of the tribe, words of healing and of exorcism.
Let's face it, I realized I was a woman. So it did change my...
Once in a Lifetime is a song about preaching. How bizarre an activity it is, and yet how important it is to do it. It's a sophisticated song because it knows that along with the apparently primitive rituals of churches, there are sophisticated rituals of material success and social cool.
Ignoring whether you believe it or not, or whether you question whether some of the preachers are charlatans or not. If you ignore that, a good preacher or whatever is a good performer.
I am going to preach this word of Almighty God. I don't care what.
People who had honed their performance style in front of an audience, and they weren't judged by critics or reviews or anyone else.
We are standing in His presence on holy ground. The greatest blessing of all, that's so wonderful that at times I think that I cannot contain it.
If I went to see a preacher or went to a church service like that, I'd find myself emotionally involved even if I resisted, even if I thought I didn't believe everything he was saying. It was still very emotionally engaging. So I thought here was a performance style that I can definitely learn something from.
I am blessed. That is the greatest blessing that mankind has ever known.
My God, what have I done? Letting the days go by. Let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by. Water flowing under.
This respect for alien skills is at the heart of Byrne's musical intelligence. Talking Heads' work constantly makes a characteristically American realization of how foreign much that goes on in your own native country is.
There is water underground. Letting the days go by. Into the silent water.
They work through so mmany aspects of America that it can look as if they're just aping the numberless varieties of the American dream. But singing releases them from the tyranny of opinions or sarcasm, and the drive behind David Byrne's voice is evidently all-American, from Bo Diddley to Bob Dylan. There's a song on the new album called Mr. Jones. Has that got anything to do with Dylan's famous Mr. Jones?
I listened to Bob Dylan's song recently, and I suppose, and this one I thought, in his, I guess the Mr. Jones is kind of bewildered and confused. And I thought, well, what if this Mr. Jones was actually having a really...
Loosen up. I believe he'll be all right. Changing clothes. Now he's got ventilated slats bouncing off the walls. Mr. Jones is back. Bulge out and wind your waist. Tight pants. Ain't got curly hair. Drinking cold beer from metal cans. Moonshine and handy wipes. Mr. Jones is back in town. It's his lucky day. Hold up your hands and shout. Jones is on his way.
Here too, it's the instrumental texture which makes the difference. Dylan's voice stands alone. You can hear that his songs began with just Dylan, his views and his guitar. David Byrne's voice is more sociable. It's always surrounded by other sounds. Byrne's song, Mr. Jones, is more generous to the clean cut than Ballad of a Thin Man, though it's less clear-cut about what it thinks. Stories usually describe construction. The central image of their work is an image of building. A rock group comes together like an extended family. There is community singing. And what they sing about is less the familiar pop romances of a sexual couple than wider and longer-lasting communities, cities, congregations, friendships, or a band. There may be dangers of self-congratulation here, or of soppiness, but David Byrne's got his eye and his ear open to them too.
I want it to be kind of like a love letter to the band. And I thought on that level it worked, and it was very sweet. It was less successful as a exciting visual piece, but for a kind of a little sentimental piece, I thought it worked okay. My feeling is that friendship and those kind of relationships are really what you build your life on, and in a big sense, in most of your relationships. And of course, you have intense love relationships, but and some of those might be lasting, but a lot of them are kind of aberrations. That they come and they go, and then you still have your friends.
We may build our life on our friends, but living is based on something more animal, on reproduction and its social places. This may not be what we're going for, or where we're going, but it's what keeps us going, strictly speaking. There's a song on the new album called The Facts of Life, which brings together the long run of evolution with the sexual curiosity of adolescence. Machines of love, as David Byrne calls them, across the ages. Machines of love. Simple, not very dignified, yet fascinating and a little scary. It may seem wacky to bring adolescence and dinosaurs together, but they do belong together. Their bodies suddenly so much bigger than their brains.
Monkey see and monkey do, making babies, eating food, smelly things, pubic hair, words of love in the sparks fly shooting out, making sure that everything is working. I can't turn you down. We are programmed happy little children, matter of a mind. We cannot resist, so I won't fight it. Love is a machine. Love is a machine without a driver. Facts of life.
We all carry the primitive inside us, in the very facts that keep us living. Not much pop music helps us face those facts. Mostly it keeps us in a world of dreams, where sex is always safe, and so is of no consequence. But these great songs are friends to the long story of the human race. You can't get tired of these songs, because you can't get tired of that story, can you?
Machines of love. Machines of love.
Do you ever get sort of tired of singing?
No, I love singing.
Do you sing in the shower?
Yeah, I sing in the street too. Not loud though.
Would you like to come home and help me sing the song? It's alright.
I love quiz shows.
A new series of Review begins this Friday evening at 9:30 and includes Barry White on his current British tour talking to Stuart Cosgrove, and also that last soul man, Bobby Womack. Over on BBC One now, Opportunity Knock.